Hello to all our listeners. Thank you for tuning in for today's latest episode of Crypto Agility Insights. My name is Nina Prasad, and I'm the VP of Customer Operations at ISG. And boy, do we have a treat for everyone tuning in. In this interview, we have the privilege of speaking with Philip George, Executive Technical Strategist at Merlin Cyber. Philip has led federal initiatives in mitigating the post-quantum cryptographic threat for national security systems, as well as supporting software code assessments and verifiable software bill of material artifacts. He has received many awards for his dedication and diligence in IT and cybersecurity throughout his career within the federal arena. So thank you, Philip, for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So you have a very impressive resume. Based on our research, you've started your career during a work-study program provided by NASA as a student researcher. And then after graduating, you were at Capital One and then as a cybersecurity contractor with organizations within the Department of Energy, also known as the DOE. After your time at the DOE, you moved into federal roles, including cyber operations within the National Nuclear Security Administration, also known as the NNSA. And then after exiting these federal roles, you have been applying your cybersecurity expertise in the private sector, and most recently working at Merlin Cyber, where the ISG team has had the pleasure of working really closely with you. So with all that said, can you share what you've learned from the past 2 decades you've spent working within the U.S. government?
Yeah, and great question, and thanks for the summation as well too. It's been quite the journey, as one would expect. That's almost 2 decades. It's been incredibly informative, but also exciting. The few things that stand out the most to me was the value of team building, managing expectations, defining completion, and accepting the fact that mistakes are going to be made. When dealing with the federal government, which has such a broad breadth and scope of technology, capabilities, as well as risks, the one thing to just realize is that there will be no perfect execution, no perfect project, and that mistakes are going to be made. And so to be forthright, communicative, as well as collaborative across your stakeholder ecosystem has really benefited both myself and the organizations that I've supported.
Wonderful. Well, throughout the time you've spent within government agencies, you must have come across several mandates compelling significant structural and operational changes. So I'm thinking about the 2022 Quantum Computing Cybersecurity Preparedness Act, which encourages federal government agencies to adopt technology that will protect against quantum computing attacks. So I would assume that some implementations or similarly mandated programs went smoother than others. I'm curious, in your experience, what were the key factors influencing how well those programs went?
Well, one of the things, when dealing with projects of this scale and with many prior whole of government initiatives, you have a varying array of acceptance, action, as well as resistance to what's been thrown out, especially if there's not necessarily funding that's available. And so you have to look at the risk register for organizations, as well as the maturity of their cyber program, and assess whether or not action can be taken today, or if it needs to be integrated and programmed into the cyber program in and of itself over time. Something that we are experiencing within this particular post-quantum migration effort is having to not just upsell or explain the value, but also make sure that impact is clearly defined and illustrated for program owners. And so that they view this not just as an academic exercise, but as actually mitigating a realistic and credible threat that is on the horizon. And so making sure that you resonate with each mission owner and or program office, what is important to them and where they are in their maturity and cyber modernization plan as a whole is critical to getting through to them so that they know to prioritize effort and activity in this particular area.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. I'm curious, in your current role, you have been working closely with federal departments, agencies, and consortiums as they finalize both the algorithms and the implementation strategy to mitigate the threat of a cryptographic quantum computer attack. Could you tell us a little bit more about the repercussions of these recent mandates, which followed the president's executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity overall?
Absolutely. 2022 was kind of the breakout year for post-quantum crypto activity in and of itself from the executive level. You have the National Security Memorandum 8, which was focused specifically on the defense and intelligence and national security systems, demonstrating the credible threat and the importance to ensure compliance with NSA-provided cryptographic mitigation strategies. Then you had NSM 10, which targeted the rest of the federal civilian ecosystem, and similarly raising the bar, setting the goal around mitigation as well as leadership in quantum research and development in and of itself. And then we go to the M2302 memorandum, which was less about where we should aspire to be from a mitigation and leadership perspective, but more about the strategy around how we're going to get there, how we should prioritize our high value assets and high impact systems, and then understand them or characterize them effectively and appropriately so that we are coming up with an effective remediation strategy in the near term, and most importantly, a more accurate budget around the level of effort and cost such a migration and adoption effort would take. And then lastly, you get the actual congressional law that was passed, which kind of codified the whole effort in and of itself, and prioritized the value of having a budgetary estimate with the promise of providing subsequent funds to ensure that execution occurs uniformly across the U.S. government.
Awesome. Well, I want to dig into the Memorandum 2302 specifically. That memorandum was released in the fall of 2022, and it was issued by the Office of Management and Budget, also known as the OMB. So the memorandum describes steps for federal agencies to take as they transition to post-quantum cybersecurity by building this prioritized inventory of their cryptographic systems. So this meant agencies had to build a prioritized inventory of their cryptographic systems within a very short time frame. So I'm curious, what were the main challenges you witnessed during that initial period with agencies within the U.S. government?
Yeah, great question. And there were definitely some significant challenges for organizations because the memorandum itself required them to actually go out and characterize subsystem components of some of these high value assets and or high impact systems, and specifically interrogate the cryptographic asymmetric cryptographic assets that were running within them. And so, this information is not necessarily readily available. It spans across a myriad array of commodity as well as industrial and or Internet of Things devices, as well as software libraries. And so the scope and scale, once again, is very broad. And the lack of automated tooling and or the ability to go out and conduct a comprehensive, in-depth scan of cryptographic assets was felt across the U.S. government. And as such, the result was manual spreadsheets and or best level of efforts that were nowhere near complete, but they were the best that organization and or department could do at the time. Thus, it illustrated a specific gap in technology and a need for that gap to be filled to provide a more in-depth and a greater assured outcome of cryptographic inventory and analysis.
Awesome. No, thanks for that summary. No, that's great. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about our partnership. So InfoSec Global and Merlin Cyber, we've entered into a partnership about a year ago to really ease the task of building a prioritized inventory of cryptographic assets with agencies within the federal government. So with this partnership, InfoSec Global and Merlin Cyber formed InfoSec Global Federal, which is a U.S. government-focused subsidiary of InfoSec Global to help agencies implement the guidance in the OMB memo 2302 that we chatted about earlier there, and in alignment with zero trust principles in Executive Order 14028. So how has our flagship cryptography discovery solution, AgileSec Analytics, how has that been received by the U.S. government community?
It's been an interesting journey. For many organizations that we've presented and demonstrated the InfoSec Global AgileSec Analytics platform to, the feedback has been very positive. It's for some of them, they were unaware that such a tool existed or such a capability existed to go out, enumerate, characterize, and score cryptographic assets across a diverse technology ecosystem. Furthermore, integrating with hardware accelerators and hardware security modules to dive even deeper into that esoteric ecosystem, cryptographic ecosystem in and of itself. So a lot of the response has been somewhat surprised and somewhat assured as well too. And the power of the partnership between InfoSec Global and the InfoSec Global Federal means that, the technology can reach civilian workloads as well as higher sensitivity defense and intelligence community workloads as well that are more concerned around supply chain assurance and integrity. And so that's kind of the rationale behind the partnership there, and making sure that this vital technology is accessible, not just functional, but once again accessible and verifiably secure for any U.S. government workload and any level of security that workload may be running on and or within.
Well, I know you're in close contact with a lot of those end users and those decision makers within those agencies. So I'm curious about what were the main benefits that they have obtained from the cryptographic intelligence that they've been able to capture via AgileSec Analytics?
Yeah, that's yet again another great question. The power of correlation and context is what stands out the most for them. We're rapidly consuming cloud services, managed services, and or bring your own insert function services. In this case, bring your own key when it comes to cloud service providers. And what we're seeing and we're hearing from system owners is some of them feel like they're losing visibility and control with regards to the data and or the workloads that have been migrated into these environments. And so what we're positing to them is the ability to kind of regain some of that insight and moreover add critical cryptographic context around what's happening, who's using what privileged cryptographic asset and why. Establish a baseline that can then be used for correlation when it comes to benign versus malicious activity. Adversaries seem to be exploiting this very outcome, the migration of traditional workloads into cloud environments and poor visibility and or control around these privileged cryptographic assets. And so in order to offset that, we have to give the net defender more insight, more threat intelligence, more context for them to make a more effective determination around malfeasance and potentially enhance the threat hunt action and or hopefully outcome in and of itself.
Great. No, thank you so much for that insight. That's great. AgileSec Analytics is on the Department of Homeland Security's approved product list for on-prem use, and we are close to completing the FedRAMP certification process for GovCloud users. So we're very excited about that. Have you had a chance to witness unexpected ways the tool has been used by government agencies?
Yeah, and so there have been some unique use cases and or applications for that matter. We are seeing more and more utilization around CI/CD pipeline analysis, as well as a tool to more rapidly manage and deploy new cryptographic algorithms in and of itself. And so, the ability for the AgileSec Analytics platform to not just establish a policy that monitors for compliance, but also be the mechanism to deploy and or implement cryptographic sovereignty across a disparate ecosystem is transformative. It's something that's also aligning with a more availability focused deployment strategy for sensitive assets. In the event where one endpoint or one host goes down, you can reprovision another to take on a more focused role in a tactical and or operational scenario. And so think of it as, traditionally we have a single HSM that is utilized across multiple assets. Well, what if we're able to turn any asset into an HSM based upon loss of communication and or loss of the primary HSM function or availability? Well, we're able to then distribute and or reassign some of these critical roles, cryptographic roles to other assets that are still available and or operational. And yes, we have seen some unique applications when it comes to the AgileSec analytics platform across the federal government. A couple come to mind in particular that involve some hardware HSM manufacturers and the ability to reassign HSM rows and support rapid, if not real-time, reassignment of cryptographic algorithms across a distributed ecosystem. We've also seen cryptographic policy and agility be applied for flexible device onboarding for headless and or industrial control system endpoints that are deployed to remote locations. And that FDO process, which is promulgated by the FIDO organization, has essentially been made agile and flexible to evolving and or changing cryptographic algorithms, specifically the adoption of post-quantum algorithms as they are formalized by the NIST program. So these are just two of many other unique use cases that we're seeing developed by the Defense Department as well as Energy Department when it comes to protecting critical infrastructure and other tactical deployment scenarios.
Thanks so much for that insight, Phil. That's great. Can you share any best practices from government enterprises making great progress towards quantum safety today?
Absolutely. We've been working with many civilian organizations that are making great progress in just planning and setting up the necessary infrastructure to begin adopting and migrating towards post-quantum algorithms. But some of the lessons learned from them are focusing on specifically not boiling the ocean. If you go back to M2302, they state, the focus is on high value assets, but more importantly, you have to understand the flow of data. And something I've always said over the course of my federal career is follow the data and give the data a voice. Like the data needs to be able to speak to where it's been, who's accessing it, and if those accessing it have the proper need to know. If you can characterize those aspects around your data set, then you can better begin the process of inventory, the cryptographic functions that are protecting the data in and of itself. So just be prepared to fully understand and walk with the data flow from creation to dissemination, because all of those devices and endpoints and or the network transport could potentially be in scope. And so you want to make sure that you have the appropriate deployment strategy in place to cover all of those devices so that you don't miss any particular link in that chain, because as we all know, the weakest link in the chain causes the chain to fail, especially in the area of cryptography.
So having an inventory of cryptographic systems is a high priority for federal government leaders overseeing the shift to quantum secure systems. Building crypto-agile systems, which enables organizations to shift cryptographic algorithms with minimal efforts, remains on the horizon and a top priority for many. Can you tell us about the U.S. government's interest in crypto-agile chiplets and the possibilities they would create?
Absolutely. Agility at the hardware layer is kind of tip of the spear. It's very bleeding edge, but it is of high desirability, especially when it comes to being able to repurpose chiplets for multiple workloads and or use cases. Effectively, the government would like to see extended life cycle without a compromise around security. As well as, obviously the reduction in size, weight, and power consumption, or what they call SWaP-C. But crypto agility at the hardware layer specifically focuses on extending the useful life of a particular hardware component, as well as giving it the ability to adopt new cryptographic primitives and their algorithms based upon real-time scenarios. Be it a tactical scenario and or a just availability scenario, loss of connectivity to a primary versus a secondary. So there is an integrity component to this. There's an availability component to this, but most importantly, we're supporting the government's need for greater diversity and or flexibility of hardware in what could be potentially a hardware constrained future, for that matter, from a supply chain perspective. From the commercial side of things, there's substantial value in, once again, extending the useful life of hardware, but more importantly, being able to provide full management, cradle to grave, of cryptographic functions and assets for customers from a managed service perspective. I mentioned the flexible device onboarding process earlier. There are major manufacturers today that are providing such a service for large organizations, entertainment organizations, as well as critical infrastructure like power distribution and production facilities, to where they're managing the IT that is communicating with the OT and bringing in valuable telemetry around the safe operation of these endpoints. So the more that we're able to extend the useful life of this equipment, as well as protect the telemetry coming from these devices, the greater value the end user, as well as the U.S. citizen and other consumers achieve from these devices as well.
Wonderful. Well, Philip, you've got a lot of experience, a lot of insight, and I'm curious if you have any messages you'd like to share about the future of cryptography, cybersecurity, or even InfoSec Global's federal mission in the market.
Yeah, the future right now is interesting. We have a lot that's happening from quantum to AI, and maybe a convergence of the two. But I think from a post-quantum cryptography perspective, we're working through what I like to call a cryptographic bridge, leading up to what will hopefully be a QIS, or quantum information sciences provided cryptographic solution that is separate and apart, different from the cryptographic solutions we're seeing today. But the value and the importance of being able to bridge that gap between classic cryptography, post-quantum cryptography, and true quantum cryptography is very important. It's vital for us to maintain what I like to call the cryptographic Cold War balance between us and our adversaries. We need to be able to protect the nation's interest, the world's interest when it comes to intellectual property, and we have to be able to do it in a cost-effective manner without ripping and replacing everything that we have. And so, in my mind, cryptographic agility is essential to in achieving such an outcome, while also enabling and giving us more time to refine and perfect quantum information sciences and quantum encryption in and of itself. So they kind of go one and the same. And what we're going to see from a cyber perspective is, the valuation of human experience in conjunction with the adoption of artificial intelligence interactions and training. There's a lot of opportunity there for us to leverage the power of AI in identifying patterns of use and abuse, especially in the area of cryptography. So any sort of adversarial targeting of weak cryptographic systems and or components, we need to find ways to employ agility and machine learning and AI there to potentially weed out and to identify nation state activity that's been present and low and slow from an infiltration and persistence perspective. So a lot of opportunity here when it comes to technology innovation, adoption, and mitigation strategies. We just need to keep our appetite for the level of effort that it's going to take for us to continue this collaboration between public and private partnerships, similar to that which that NIST has put together by way of the post-quantum crypto consortium. It's been very successful and proves the value of public-private interaction when it comes to innovation, as well as establishing a desired outcome and future state. We need to do this more and expand it broader across other similar areas of interest.
Well, my last question is, do you have any tips for aspiring cybersecurity professionals? Like, what would be your number one tip for someone looking to build a career in this field?
Yeah, that's a kind of a tough one, but it's an interesting one because the field is evolving so rapidly. I would say for younger up and coming cyber professionals to offer themselves opportunities or seek out opportunities to not just learn by way of academic experience, but also through apprenticeship. It's cybersecurity is just as much a trade craft in as much as it is an academic discipline. And they both bring value into the nexus of understanding how to be a more effective cyber professional. Historically, we have a dichotomy between continuous monitoring and cyber operations or incident analysts. But where I see the future going is we're going to need to see a convergence of that, especially with the advent of machine learning and artificial intelligence. You need to understand both sides of that coin and how to speak towards either outcomes, why it's important to baseline and continuously monitor a boundary, but more importantly, why it's important to make sure that you have really strong cyber hygiene, logging, and effective telemetry and threat intelligence to inform threat hunt. Because there's no cyber strategy or mitigation capability that is foolproof, and there's always the potential for vulnerability to gain a foothold within a boundary. It's just whether or not you're able to detect them. So, for the next generation of cyber professionals, obviously leverage the technology, but don't dismiss and or miss out on any opportunities to apprentice under a current cyber professional and learn the institutional knowledge that they have around executing their tasks today, and in the manner that they do it today. Hindsight is 2020, and there's a lot of value from lessons learned and life experiences.
Well, that's great advice. Thank you so much. Well, this concludes our interview today. Thank you, Philip, for your insight, advice, and guidance. It really is a pleasure working with you, and I'm thrilled that we were able to give our audience this wealth of information via this platform. And thank you to our listeners. We would like to encourage you to stay informed about the great work we're doing and what we're seeing in the market by visiting our website at www.infosecglobal.com. And while you're there, please do subscribe to our newsletter where we'll be delivering fabulous content right into your inbox on a monthly basis. So thanks again for tuning in, everyone, and bye for now.
Thank you.